Okay guys, here's our goal today. We're going to take these 3 die cuts and transform them into this one and add some color along the way. So the first step is to take your bud and a pair of fussy scissors. These are really teeny scissors that work well when you're cutting teeny things. Okay, so let me zoom in. Okay, so you're going to take your bud and we have to cut off these little green or leaves that we want to be green. If you notice on the original, these 2 leaves are green, so we don't want them in pink, so we're going to cut them off. What you want to do is hold it upside down, put your scissors right above this first leaf, and there's a little slit right here, and you're just going to bridge the gap between the top of that leaf and the slit. Then follow that over and snip off the other side. If this ends up a little jagged, you can futz with it a little bit more, but if there's a little teeny bit of paper hanging off, don't worry about it. It's not going to be noticeable. Okay, so now we need to take another tool. Okay, now we're going to need to take this little makeup brush and the red ink. What we're going to do is we're going to put a shadow on the bud. The shadow is going to go along the top, side, and bottom, and we're going to leave this side open. In order to use this makeup brush, you load it up with ink just by scraping it across the top. You don't have to do it hard. It helps, especially if this brush is clean, to kind of mush it into the mat a little bit and get it going. Let me zoom in. Okay, so you get some ink on your brush. I'm going to suggest that we put a handle on this so that it's easier to hold. You can do it with your finger, but you'll get ink on your fingers and probably on your bud when you turn it around. So what I'm going to suggest is this little paper handle. This is just a little piece of white paper, and on the end of it, it has some removable adhesive or repositionable. This is Dotto. You could also use Tombow. If you put a few drops on here and let it dry for 5 or 10 minutes, it'll do the same thing. Okay, so take your bud, hold it up right side, then turn it over on the back and upside down. You're going to want to put this tab on the back. Just make sure that it doesn't go past this slit because we need this to be able to move. Okay. Now you've got something to hang on to. So take your brush. Now the motion that we're going to be doing is a circular motion in small circles, but you start on the mat and you go from the mat onto the cardstock in little circles just as far as you need it to go. So you don't want to start on the cardstock because it will start leaving lines. Okay, so it looks like this. And we're going to do the top all the way down the side and the bottom. Now the first one you go through, it's actually good if you don't get too much ink. I feel like I want more. Okay. Once you have a little bit on there, it blends a little bit better. So now we're going to go little circles around the bottom, the side up to that slit. It's okay if you go a little bit over. If you feel like you're getting lines, you can kind of, not scrub, but run the brush back over it or add more ink. But if you're getting lines that you don't like, chances are it's because you're doing it too hard. So lighten up and go softly. It's better to go over it multiple times softly than it is to try to get a bunch on there at once. If one area seems lighter, like right here, I want the top to be darker, then I'm going to start on that side. Yeah. Okay. Now, once you feel like you don't have that much ink on your brush, or if you do, just sort of wipe some off. We just want a little bit. We're going to just lightly go across the middle just a couple of times. It'll make for an easier transition. It's not totally necessary, but it does help for some reason. Okay, now we have to add the highlights. The highlights are going to go in 2 places. They're going to go along this inner slit and along this outside that we haven't touched yet. Now, unfortunately, you can't do both of those at the same time because at some point you have to hold it, and the white ink that we're going to use is a pigment ink, which means it's going to dry much slower than the red ink. The red ink was a dye ink, and they dry pretty quick. So what I'm going to suggest is that we do the inside first and leave it on this handle. So then you're going to grab your next tool, which is this. It's a blending stick. It's just a stick with a little piece of foam on the end of it. And the way that you apply the ink is you just tap it. You don't want to scrub on this one because, or, you know, brush back and forth, because this has a foam applicator, and you just got to tap. Otherwise, it'll just cause problems. Okay, so now what we're going to do is take your bud, and this is where the second little square is going to come in, or triangle, whatever you want to call this. What we're going to do is we're going to push that in between the slit. Now, I've made a bend on here, and you're just going to push it in until the bend gets to the end of the paper, so that you can hold it on this side and bend it with this with your finger, and it will make it stick out on its own. So stick the paper in, hold it on the back, then take another finger and pull that back. Then we're going to scrape the foam on the end of this blender gently from front to back to get some ink on that edge. Now, if you feel like you're not getting much at all, you're going to angle your blender stick towards you a little bit so that it's at a steeper angle, and then go back and forth and just until you get a little line. Then go back to your ink, get a fresh coat of ink on your sponge, and then just tap totally perpendicular to it just to get the very edge a little more white. So just tap it along. You're just barely touching it. There you go. Then you're done. And then you're going to carefully, without touching the white part, take this off your handle and set this aside to dry. Once it's dry in about 5 minutes or so, maybe not even that long, in a few minutes that'll be dry, and we can do the other side. Until then, let's go ahead and work on the leaves. Okay, so of this part, all we really need are these, the bottom leaves, but it's hard to glue it on if you don't have something there. So we're going to cut this. Just go to the top of this leaf at pretty much the same angle and just cut forward. We're going to make it look like a little arrow. On this side, turn it over, and on this side, go to the top of those leaves and just pick an angle and cut forward. All right, so that way when we glue it, we have a part to glue that's easier. Okay, now we don't need this stem, but when you're inking, it's easier to hold on to it with this. So go ahead and leave the stem on for now. Now you're going to grab your second blending tool. This one should have green on it. And we're going to grab the green ink. And we just need the tips of these leaves. Oh, we're out of focus. The tips of these leaves and the middle part of the stem. So on this one, you can't really go, you can go in circles, but it's kind of annoying. You can also just tap. I don't know how well this is showing. Here we go. So we just need the tips. There's enough over here you can kind of grab too. Okay. And you just need the tips. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just need some color variation in there. Okay. Now, once it is colored, we're going to go ahead and cut the stem off. Just hold it upside down. And you can kind of see there's a little triangle here. You're just going to kind of continue that line. Doesn't have to be perfect, but that's what we're looking for. Okay. Now what we need to do is prep the stem that we're going to use with the leaves. Now, the concept of this, let me show you a whole leaf thing that's done, is to turn it into leaves that look that. And all we've done is add dark ink through the middle, and then on the bottom of the leaves, and then on the tips of the leaves, we're putting white. Now, because we don't need all the leaves, you could cut them off now. But I actually find it gives more stability to this if you just do the whole thing. I use it as practice anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and do it when it's still attached. Dealer's choice. If you want to go ahead and cut them, this is the kind of the guide of what you're going to cut out. The black ones you would cut off. And I'll do that at the end. Okay, so first we need some green ink in the middle. So you just kind of swipe down and or tap, depending on how it's going. I like to swipe more than I tap. And you just want that inside stem and a little bit going on the bottom of the leaves. Now technically the only ones I really have to do the bottoms of or to go in very far are these two. So I'm not going to worry so much about the others. Then you're going to go back to your unicorn ink, the white one, get some white on there, and you're just going to tap at the top of, oops, separate them out, and you're just going to try to get the top half of them. If you feel like you get too harsh of a line, flip it over and use the dry side to kind of brush that back. There we go. Now, we are going to need the bottom part of this stem, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of just tap at the bottom. It doesn't have to be completely saturated. In fact, it usually looks better if there's a little bit of two different types of green in there. And if anything else looks weird. Okay, now we're going to let this dry and then cut it. Let's go ahead and go back to the bud. And I'm going to recommend at this point that we use the baby wipe to clean up the ink that's left on the mat. Okay, so you're going to grab your bud, and we're going to take the white blender stick, and we're going to put ink all along this side, brushing back to front, or front to back, all the way down to where the red starts. Angling the stick more towards you if you want more ink. Then once you have your line, you're going to reload your foam with some fresh ink, and then just perpendicular light tap right on the edge. Okay, now we're going to set that aside to dry and work on the stem. If you haven't already cut it, we need to cut some leaves off. And I actually prefer to do this upside down because it's easier to get the scissors in there. So the black ones are the ones we're going to cut off. So on the right side, it's this one. And the bottom one. And on this side, it's the one in the middle. There we go. Now we're going to glue all these together. So grab your 3 pieces. First, we're going to put the bud onto the leaves. So you're going to take your glue. This is art glitter glue. It doesn't have glitter in it. It's actually meant for you to put glitter on top of, but it's super strong. And it has this cool applicator tip that you can buy to go with it. And you just take the pin out and put the pin on the magnet or somewhere safe. Then you're going to squeeze it a little bit away from your project just to make sure that a little glue is coming out. Then you're going to just put a couple little dots on the upper part. It does not take much. Then take some fussy tweezers. These are very sharp. Please do not try to jab anybody with these. They will break skin, and if you drop them, they will actually hurt your mat. If you look, see that dot right there? Yeah, that's where I dropped the tweezers. It creates a hole and then ink and stuff gets in there. So try not to drop these, and definitely don't jab them at anybody. Okay, so you're going to grab your bud, and you can kind of see that little slit. You sort of aim for just beyond or just over that slit and give it a press. Okay, then we're going to do the same thing here. Going to take a little bit of glue, squeeze a little ball out to make sure it's working, and then just dab a few dots on the leaf part, not too much. Then you take your tweezers and you grab your bud and you just line up the stem with where you cut. There we go. Add a little press. And there you go. Give it a few minutes to dry before you do anything with it. But you have now a completed rosebud. I hope you were successful. Bye.